The film about Kermit Gosnell has entered its second week at the box office. It entered its second week this past weekend. And despite only showing on 600 or so theaters in its first week, and despite the limited budget, and despite being ignored by the media, it managed to crack the top 10 in its first week, the top 10 at the box office, which is extremely impressive. Okay, to get into the top 10, given the situation. Now, keep this in mind when it comes to box office totals, and you hear about a movie like Avengers is number one at the box office for 10 straight weeks or whatever. Well, keep in mind that movies like the Avengers, they open on 4,000 screens, and they have hundreds of millions of dollars of marketing and merchandise. I mean, you can't avoid them. For 6 months leading up to the movie coming out, the movie's everywhere. Everywhere you go, you see it. You see previews of commercials and merchandise, and then it's on every single screen across the universe. And so a movie like that, it has to be number one. It's got to be number one for 2 months. If it's not, then it's a massive failure, because the movie studios pay a lot of money to manufacture interest and to get the movies out there. And so that's why, in my mind, there's nothing particularly impressive about a massively hyped, massively expensive movie showing on 4,000 screens with 15 showings apiece, ending up number one at the box office. But that's why I'm never, every time there's a new Marvel movie or Star Wars, and everyone's like, oh, it's the number one movie in history again. Well, of course, number one, that movie tickets now cost $87 as opposed to in the 90s when they were $5. And the movie studio is paying millions of dollars to brainwash us into seeing the freaking thing. So of course it's number one. That's not impressive. But a movie like Gosnell, with no press, very little marketing, on a few screens and a small budget, well, cracking $1 million and the top 10 in that case is huge. Yet, as the Daily Wire reported this weekend, the film was dropped. Again, only its second week, it was dropped from almost 200 screens of the only 600 it was showing on in its second week. This is a top 10 movie that was dropped in its second week and dropped from theaters with 20 or 30 screens where it was in the top 10 among all those films. And many of those theaters dropped it after 1 week, which is unprecedented, it's unheard of. Despite what anyone might want to say to try to come up with a rationale, this is unheard of. This doesn't happen. Even if a movie performs really poorly in its first week, it's pretty rare for it to be dropped after 1 week. Usually at least gets one other week. But to be a top 10 movie and then get dropped after 7 days in the theater, it's just it's ridiculous.